push the send button. And I was almost tempted to send out yet another email, but I thought you were being inundated with altogether too many emails between Eric, me, 3 from Michael in the last week and a half or so. So you didn't get to hear what his topic is, but I was quite interested when he told me it's all about old dogs and new tricks, finding new interests and adventures in later life. So I was quite keen on that as an idea, although as I remarked at dinner when we were chatting over our supper tonight, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to find any more time for any more new interests. I already feel like I'm totally busy, so I'm interested in whether it might have an answer for that too. But anyway, please give it up for Michael.
It was working fine before.
It was working fine until I started pressing buttons, right?
Put a nickel in there.
Yeah.
Wow, we have the applause can.
We already got applause coming here. So,
probably the projector.
Is it just like
nothing.
Just unplugged. Power.
I might have kicked it.
Because you moved it.
Oh
you
my
moved the
goodness.
cable. Yeah, there you go. So then,
Got it.
Did you go to sleep?
No light.
Okay, now
something blue,
Oh.
something like on the top. Something
Yeah.
like that.
Okay.
It probably just went to sleep.
It might just be there. I
Any
won't.
more, Captain, she's
so
gonna
just
blow.
push the power button again.
Try the power button again.
Yep, just give it a second.
There we go.
It's revving.
Okay. Okay, here we go. I'll try from the beginning. See if,
Michael, you're gonna,
I
of course,
thought you
send
did
me
that.
yours.
Are we teaching Michael a new trick then?
yes, you know, it's so true. It says to hit from the beginning. There. Yeah. Ah. Isn't that great?
You could send me the PowerPoint when you're done, right?
All 99 slides.
Are you serious?
Me? When have you ever known me to be serious? So, on a Friday night. Is this on? Look at that. Righty. So, I'm not Mr. PowerPoint. I actually had to go ask Jared a couple questions, and you'll see from the PowerPoint that it's filled with glitches. As I started doing it, the text became really tiny in the little box in the corner, and I couldn't figure out how to make it bigger. I just said, you know what? The text isn't really what's important about this. And it's the fact that I actually decided I'm going to do a PowerPoint anyway. I've probably done 6 PowerPoints in my life. They were invented well after I'd gotten out of school. So no more excuses about that. The subject is, as you can see, old dogs and new tricks, adventures and interests to keep us happy, healthy, and young. Somewhere, as I was coming from upstairs to downstairs, I had a book of the writings in my hand, and I put it down, and I don't know where it is, and I thought maybe that's a sign. I don't need to read you a passage from the posthumous theological work on charity, where it describes all the different varieties of charity and the different degrees and different elements of it and how it's practiced, etc. There's a whole section, page and a half or so, called Diversions of Charity. And the upshot is that you have to take a break. You really need to take a break. And the more you love useful things, the more you need to take a break. And that people who are just after all the gusto in life because they want to be known as, the guy that did everything. So if it's all about honor, reputation, and gain. So you did find people that will be always doing something, but none of it's recreation. It's all to be like bragging rights or something. So it talks about how charity with people who are in loves of uses, it's necessary to unstretch. It says the mind becomes stretched and it needs to be relaxed. The same affections will be involved, but you're not doing the same things. So you do something different, even though you're still loving your use. Now, I wanted to ask any of you if you know that passage in the writings that talks about the requirements before one retires from your job, or about the passage on retirement. Any of you familiar with that passage? I'm glad to see you all shaking your head, because there is no passage, as far as I've ever been able to find, that talks about retirement.
You're supposed to be dead by
Yeah. Trick question. Yeah, so there's no passage, there's no statement, there's no discussion about the regenerative cycle or the developmental stages of life in the writings that then includes when you reach a certain age you should retire. What takes the place of that, in my opinion, is the section on diversions. So sometimes we need longer diversions, and it's not to say that retirement is evil. It's just it's not something that's in the writings as a way of performing your use until you stop performing a use. People who are looking forward to getting out of being useful, their retirement is not going to be really good. It'll be warm, but not necessarily the right kind of warmth. Or it'll be really cold. Some say the world will end in fire, and others say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. Robert Frost wrote that. So there's no passages, there's no doctrine on retirement. There's a doctrine or a set of teachings on diversions. So when Patrick asked me to do this talk, he said, well, talk about whatever, talk about that motorcycle trip you took. Talk about, so I thought, well, who wants to see motorcycles? Dave? Michael? So this is not about motorcycles yet. So in doing some research about how we stay healthy as we age, as we mature, this is taken from something called the Rhodes Scholars, which is a play on the word for rogue scholars, people who are rogues. No, it's actually a play on the word for Rhodes Scholars. Some very wealthy gentleman named Rhodes gave a lot of money. Yes. So, say again? Yes, I heard he wasn't whatever. We'll go. So there are 12 top hobbies or activities for senior years of retirement that are mentioned. Then the 4 key elements that keep us mentally healthy and aware and just overall healthy have to do with socializing, moving, creating, and thinking. Well, when the writings talk about what people do for diversions, it says it should involve the 5 senses. And so for the diversions of the eyes or of the sight, it talks about gardens, reading the paper, it talks about taking walks or hikes, it talks about various kinds of games that are played with dice and balls and cards. So those things are specifically mentioned in the writings. For the ears, there are harmonies, there are songs, there's speech or plays, presentations for the ears. For the sense of taste, there are banquets and there are delightful social gatherings involving food. So it makes sense that obviously we have something that we do, and we can't do it all the time, but we must do it sometimes. So these things kind of go into that. 4 things. So they break it down, and there are 12 things listed. I'm going to start into some of them. Some there's pictures that I decided I'd post the pictures to. Some of them I just skip right over, like learning a foreign language. Who wants to do that? Actually, it's a very useful thing to do. It's just I didn't even bother to write it down. So, participating in a book club. Did I skip one? No, there you go. Participating in a book club. And in that I mentioned that church scripture and book studies highly qualify for something to do that is involving the mind and keeps you active and social. But a lot of people get involved with book clubs. Anybody here in a book club? A lot more women do it. It's socializing. What do you think comes next? Hiking. No, well, there's that guy. That's me. Along with hiking, and you can see there that I actually don't run on the ground. If you look closely, you'll notice that I'm actually floating. Yeah, my shadow is above So this is me running a race that I did last Saturday, a week ago tomorrow. First race I ever ran at 63, and it's just diversion. The money that's collected goes towards the Buckeye. That's the little town west of Phoenix. The Buckeye Youth and Scholarship Recreation Fund. So, they just take the money that's collected from the runners, and it pays for some of the swag, like, this really fancy. If you can read that, I got 2nd place in my age group. So I got that little blue thing underneath the little thing that said I participated. You know, there are 3 other guys in my age group. Yeah, the number 1 guy in my age group, which is 60 to 65, the number 1 guy, he was also the number 4 guy of the 100 participants. So he was running really fast. And the number 3 guy behind me was a 56-year-old man, and he was just a few seconds behind. So he probably couldn't float like me. Yeah, probably couldn't. Oh, here I am, floating again, yep. So it was a wonderful event. I had been training for it. I continue to train for it. I think I'm going to be doing one on spring break when I go down to Florida and visit my daughter Rachel. It's something to look forward to, gives me something to think about that connects my physical health with a goal, right? We can all say, well, I want to lose so much weight or I want to be in shape or whatever. And I thought, you know, having that 10K ahead of me, and I've been thinking about it for the last probably 6 months, talking with my daughter Emily, who lives in Arizona. Gwen and I went to visit them. And she was going to join me, but she never got out there quite enough to run. She said, Dad, how about the 5K? And I said, you know, I do the 5K pretty regularly just when I go out for running, for exercise. Do a 5K run when we do the run we do with the school for the Terry Fox Day. So I said, no, I want to do the 10K. So she came out and they cheered me on, but I ended up doing the 10K run. Walking and hiking comes with fresh air and quickened pulse. Blah, 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 good stuff. My latest thing I say is, my latest craze is running. Not that I don't like hiking. So while we were out in Arizona, this is not me hiking. This is actually Gwenda doing a yoga stance on top of a rock in Flagstaff at 7,000 feet. And she just decided, yeah, I'm going to try one of those too for fun. So she's not standing on a car, she's standing on a boulder in front of the car. And those are the San Francisco peaks in Flagstaff area, the highest one being about 12,000 feet. I think that's at Mount Eva. That's snow, yeah. So we went for a hike. The guy beside me is Gwenda's cousin. His name is Gary Glenn. He's the oldest male grandchild of K.R. Alden. And Gwenda and him have been friends since forever. Cousins, of course. And we definitely, when we went to Arizona, we wanted to visit with Gary. So there's Gwenda, and that's my daughter Emily in the white hoodie, and you know who I am. So there we are looking over the southern plains of Flagstaff, not the northern mountains, or the mountains to the north. Hiking. So I love going on hikes. When I lived in Arizona, I would go up this peak that my 2 granddaughters, Sadie and Penny, are standing on, or standing in front of. So we took a hike when we were out there. So this is going to divert from me talking about adventures, some things that we should all do, to just a bunch of pictures of Michael and his family. So bait and switch. So one of the things you can do to keep young is to keep your mind active. And one of the things mentioned in these 12 different things you ought to do is studying genealogy. Abundant internet resources, the advent of digital tools, genealogy has become perhaps never more popular than it is now. I'm not reading that well. You can read it if you really want to. It's just telling you genealogy is really cool if you like that kind of thing. Learning a foreign language is cool if you like it. I love genealogy. I found out, and I'm so proud of this, that I'm more Canadian than John Parker. My ancestors were here when his ancestors were back in England trying to figure out what to do with themselves. You know what I'm saying? But look at the ancestor that came over. That is your friend and mine, Frederick Gockel. He's my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. He is the ancestor of all those Strohs you know, who when they look at you, they might look that way with one eye and that way with the other eye. It's a family heritage. I inherited it. My children or grandchildren may receive it. My sister Denise had her eye exercises for years. You might know Marilyn Stroh, Rosalie Stroh, what was the minister's name? Kenneth Stroh. Kenneth had a pronounced wandering eye. Well, guess where it came from? That guy there, Frederick Gockel, after whom Gockel Street and Frederick Street in Kitchener are named. He came over in 1805, landed in Philadelphia, was an indentured servant for a few years, came up here. He's very German from Hamburg, and and got into the brewery business in Cambridge area, and then in what was then called the Queen's Bush, which they decided on his veranda. He started the Walper, what is now the Walper Hotel in Kitchener, and right, you know that place? Oh, yeah. Okay. He was a Brewster. Yeah. Well, you probably have ancestors that are connected. And yeah. Yeah. So we come by it honestly. So Germanic stock. He had 3 daughters. He had 3 wives. He said his first wife was from heaven, his second wife was from the world, and his third wife was from hell. That's what we hear about him, if you know the ancestry. And he had 3 daughters. One daughter married a Stroh, Jacob Stroh, and that's where many of the Stroh, all the Strohs that you know in the church are descendant from his one daughter. And all the Welkleys that you know in the church are descended from his other daughter, and I forget who the third one married, a Rushman or something like that. So Frederick Gockel, they named the town Berlin, proudly made in Berlin. I think they're redoing that name, that motto now back in the original Berlin. But our Kitchener, which was Berlin, except in the First World War, we changed it to Kitchener because Berlin didn't have such a good marketing name. Hassenflug, no. So, genealogy. So that is my American family that came up as loyalists, called the Hugheses. That this fellow here is Jeremiah Boone Hughes. In 1898, he was the mayor of Waterloo. His younger brother is my great-great-great-great-grandfather, married an Aarons, who was the granddaughter of Gockel. And I know there will be a test about all this later on. That's Aaron Street is named after them. That's correct. And Jeremiah Boone Hughes here, like I say, he was in the insurance business, as so many people at that time. This is probably in the 1870s. Might even have a date on it somewhere. And his younger brother was my grandfather, Dr. Samuel Lount Hughes, who was born right after Samuel Lount himself got a special necktie party. Who knows the date of that event? Samuel Lount. 1837, that'll do. He did. The rebellion of 1838 or 1837. Yeah, so Samuel Lount Hughes was related to Samuel Lount, and those are the guys that did the closest thing to the Canadian Revolution that we had. Was, Montgomery's Inn, and they marched down Yonge Street, and they all got routed, and one of the guys got caught and got hung. 2 other guys got caught and got hung. One of them was my great-great-great-great-great-uncle, and the other one was the guy that became prime minister, right? Yeah. Yeah, so he actually escaped to Niagara and came back after things settled with the family compact. I don't want to go into too much history. So that's the Hughes family. Yes? Jeremiah Boone Hughes, yeah. So I got to be careful giving presentations like this. Jeremiah Boone Hughes, and his wife was the cousin of Mrs. Welkley, right? So Fred Welkley, my great-great-great-grandfather, Fred Welkley married a Hughes, one of these family, and so a lot of those Hugheses became New Church or were connected with the church, etc. So, and my great-great-great-grandfather married my ancestor. They were my ancestors. Well, Samuel Lount is a name in history of Canadians. Samuel Lount Hughes you never heard of unless you kind of were related to him. So I knew my ancestor was Samuel Lount Hughes. And when I saw this Samuel Lount story, a documentary about the rebellion of 1837, I paid attention. I thought, I got to be real. Nobody would name their child Samuel Lount Hughes unless they're naming him after Samuel Lount, right? Right? Those family names, you don't give them out unless you have to, right? So I called up whoever it was, CTB or whoever it was that put on this documentary. I was living in Kitchener, it was 1993 or 4 or whatever, and I said, I'm curious, how did you do, what's the genealogy behind this story? I mean, is this accurate? Yes, it is. Well, here's our producer's name. I called up the producer. The producer said, yeah, we had somebody who had done genealogical files on the family. Get a hold of him. So I called this guy up, and this old guy, he's probably my age now, but he answered the phone, and I said, you were the consultant on the Samuel Lount story. Yeah. I said, well, I think I'm related to him. My great-great-great-grandfather was named Samuel Lount Hughes. I said, do you have some information? He said, okay, well, what's your name, and who's your mother? Right? We always ask that in the church, right? Well, he wasn't, doing that for church stuff. So I told him my mother was Ingrid Odner. He said, I'll call you back up in 20 minutes, all right? And I said, right, yeah. Why would you do that? But I gave him my number, and 20 minutes later, he calls me up. He said, you're Michael Cowley, and your mother is Ingrid Odner Cowley, and her mother was Flora Welkley, and her mother was Carol Hughes, and her mother was Margaret Ahrens, and her mother was Elizabeth Gockel, and her father. I said, I think I have your genealogy, and I said, I think you do have my genealogy. I went over to visit this guy. He had a stack of stuff already out this big, file after file after file of genealogical files he had and his uncle, DeWitt Kenton, had. And so we spent an hour just looking through all these files. He gave me photographs that he no longer wanted. And he said, yeah, well, it was a lot. My uncle, David McFall, he was a doctor and when he retired, but something blah, 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 he tells me some stuff. So I get all this stuff. I go to the library and photocopy a slew of files. So I've got a stack this big of my genealogical files. I'll have an easy retirement, right? Because it says genealogy is a great thing to do in your retirement. I've put a lot of it online already. So as soon as I, don't tell my story. When you present, you can present. Got to give away my punchline. So, my father-in-law, as we all know, loves history. I respect and love history too. And so as soon as I'm done with this guy, I said, Dad, and I was living in Kitchener. This guy was up in Aurora someplace. I said, Dad, I got to come over and show you this stuff. It's going to blow you away. So I get over, sitting down with my father-in-law, going through this stuff. He says, where did this all come from? I said, it was some guy, Dr. David McFall. And Dad says, he delivered me. Right? Small world, right? So Dr. McFall was a family physician that many people in Toronto, maybe some of you other people, had him as your family physician too. He was connected with the Hughes family and also with the church families. He went playing fiddle with K.R. Alden back in the day and stuff like that. So anyway, fun stuff. So Hawksville is named after my ancestors. These Hugheses were married to Hawks. And as I'm showing you, well, you can figure out which guy Jeremiah Boone is by now. He's a guy with a beard. Very rare at that time.
Michael, this Dr. McFall is a leading member of our congregation here when I was a boy.
Oh.
Every Sunday he would be there. And he didn't drive himself. He was driven with his chauffeur.
Nice.
And he always had DeSotos. Each one, a new one would come along, he'd get a new DeSoto. That was just his thing. DeSoto was like Chrysler.
Yeah, good.
And after church on a Sunday, we'd go out to the car because his chauffeur would hand out humbugs for the kids.
nice.
And this was hot stuff. I'm talking now in the early 40s
Right.
and through the middle 40s.
He also,
Oh yeah.
Wow.
he when the royal family came to Toronto, he was their doctor.
Wow. Okay, so I didn't know these things. I'm learning a lot.
He was a homeopathic doctor,
Right.
and the royal family was
Correct.
homeopathic, and so when they came, he was assigned their doctor.
Lovely information. Jeremiah Boone Hughes, I pointed him out, the guy on the left up there, seated. He got a patent for lake property with his other friends from the Kitchener-Waterloo area who were in the insurance business. And the Queen gave them a patent for all the property on this lake. And they divided it up. They put the Round Lake Fishing and Hunting Club lodge on it. They moved an old school building over to this property. And this was before there was a really good road up there. I think it was, maybe sleds and dogs and stuff like that to get to it back in the turn of the century. And it just so happened that the Hughes family sort of didn't pay attention, didn't pay their taxes. Stuff came and went, and a lot of other people back in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s moved to Livingston Lake, which it was renamed. And this property that my great ancestor here, great uncle Jeremiah, had helped build, came up for sale. And who should buy it but Wayne Parker, right? So I'm up there visiting this property on Livingston Lake, and Wayne's telling the story and showing some pictures. I'm reading the names J.B. Hughes and some Hendrys. You might recognize their names as well. And some other names, if you know of some of the history of the church in Canada. A couple other names were members of this hunting club. And so it's just kind of funny that Wayne Parker's cabin in the woods, log cabin in the wood, was built by my ancestors. So, see, genealogy pays off. The bragging rights to have that one up on my brother-in-law Wayne, you don't know what that's worth. So this is a picture of John Welkley and his son, Fred Welkley, who's my great-great-grandfather. And Fred, I'll keep going with that. So John was a German-speaking newspaper publisher, writer in Allentown, Pennsylvania, very German at that time. And his son, Fred Welkley, looks a little bit like some Cowley relatives. If you can see some of our characteristics, our Welkley characteristics coming out. Just strikingly handsome, I know. So Fred Welkley, he wasn't born in Canada, but he came up here. He could speak German. He preached to the German people in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. A lot of them there back in the 20s and 30s. Married one of those Hughes descendants, right? He married a woman named Alina Hughes, the daughter of one of the people in the picture, and I didn't point him out. And here he is getting drunk with a bunch of other clergymen. So that's my... And they're going fishing. I mean, I got pictures that connected recreation and genealogy, right? Maybe. So they're passing around their bottle. I think that is the man named Homer Sinisfet. I'm not sure if that's not Bishop Andy Pendleton in his younger years. That's Carl Theophilus Odner, another one of my relatives. So his son and his daughter married each other, two ministers, and that's my grandmother and grandfather Odner. And the guy in the middle, I don't know who that is, but they're off fishing back in the day. Theological school diversion, taking a break. They're all theologues that became ministers through the years. Speaking of ministers, this is the Canadian Assembly in Waterloo, Kitchener, and you'll see the guy in the center, because I focused in on him. He wasn't actually in the center overall. But that is my great-grandfather, Fred Welkley. And I had the names of some of the other guys that are in that picture, but I can't remember who they are. But one of them has a genetic defect of long ear syndrome, and he might be your relative. I know, don't they look dignified? So Fred Welkley, aging a little bit more. There he is, a picture pastel done by his son, Richard Welkley. It's not a really good photograph. I took it at an angle, so it's not really. It's a beautiful painting, but. So there he is at the top, sitting on the porch with his wife, Alina Hughes, and his many children. You see, this is in Kitchener. This is the manse in Kitchener, Ontario. He was the pastor there for years. Traveled out west before K.R. Alden did evangelization out west. And there his lovely daughters are. That's my grandmother, Flora. That is Carol. I think she married a Welkley. That's Connie. She married Hugo Odner. No, that's Carol. And this one married a Childs. And do any of you know Stephen Gyllenhaal and Maggie Gyllenhaal, the actor and actresses? Their father, Stephen's mother is they're relatives, right? So I'm like second or third cousins with Stephen Gyllenhaal. And you might actually see a little bit of Maggie Gyllenhaal in my grandmother, or some of the other pictures. I look really like, okay, I can see where some of that looks of that actress come from the Welkley family. So the point being that Fred Welkley, connected with Alina Hughes, they're my Canadian ancestors, and I'm proud of it. If my grandmother had claimed her Canadian ancestry, I might be able to easily do who told me, I think Jim Cooper's doing some connection with parentage, but she didn't. And there Fred Welkley is in his old age holding my grandmother my mother, Ingrid Cowley, on his lap. Balsano, that says. It's bad tech. I'm moving from one family to another now. So I've given you some of the Gockles, the Aarons, the Hugheses, and into the Welkleys, coming in to my Canadian ancestry here. And now I'm moving over to some Cowley stuff. You know, that's my last name. And that's because in Balsano, which is where this homestead is, the Cowleys put up. They came over from Ireland in the 1840s, before the potato famine actually, and landed in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, a little bit north of Pittsburgh. And they had a summer home in Balsano, Pennsylvania. And there is Dr. David Cowley, my first American, not born, but raised from about 2.5 or 3 years old in the United States. He married a beautiful woman, maybe. Maybe she had no teeth by that point. I don't know. But that is my great-great-grandmother, Margaret Cowley. And then David died. He was a doctor. His son became a doctor. But he was a beloved brother. And when I worry about genetics, he died at 56. His son died at 42. His son's son, my father, died at 57. So at 63 now, I'm outliving all of my Cowley direct ancestors on up. So I'm staying with it. I'm running and hiking. Okay? So his son, Dr. David's son, David, is my grandfather. There he is, camping out. You see how they do that? And here is Homer Welkley, Homer Sinisfeld, who was sharing a bottle with my other ancestor in the earlier picture. Yeah, okay. There he is leading these Pittsburgh boys, mainly. There's some Faulkners in there and some Potts in there and some of the other names of people that are related to the church. They all look like they came out of the Civil War, don't they? In one sense, but that has to be sometime 30 years after the Civil War. And it's a little lake up in North Pennsylvania, camping out. And there's a whole, just a beautifully written, long prankster-type document about what each of their jobs was. It's a fun thing to read if you like that kind of stuff. There that young man, my grandfather, you see him here. Yeah, you saw which guy he was, right? This guy here, this guy, right there. At 18 or 19, and here he is at 25. Very dignified. He married a beautiful woman who didn't know how to pick out hats. Margaret Camlin Cowley. And I got a lot of ancestry on the Camlins, too. And there my father is, William John Cowley. He had a little sister, Margaret Vida Cowley, and those who like post boxes and stuff like that. This is what is this? Postcard. Yeah, okay. So that's the front and the back of this postcard. And this is your only niece by the name of Cowley, Margaret Vida, taken in honor and memory of her grandfather Cowley's birth into the other world and her Aunt Liddy's birth into this world. So she was born on the day when Grandpa Cowley had died and her aunt was born or something. So significant day. That's my Aunt Marty Schiffer. She became married to Schiffer. And they had a little brother. Oh, that's my dad on a pony. Again, another postcard. That's my uncle, who died at the age of 6, probably of long QT syndrome, which is a syndrome that is in my family. They didn't know what it was then. They just found the kid dead. It broke his mother's heart. My grandmother died about a year later at 40. I mean, that's what they say. She died of a broken heart. Who knows? People die a lot, especially back then. So this is about 1926, 25, 26. And little Davy's playing in the yard, getting really dirty and having a fun time. And if you look back, you go, oh man, he looks a lot like his older brother, doesn't he? Yeah, Cowley resemblance. And the reason why I say he probably died of long QT, so that's something that wasn't discovered. It's a syndrome of the heart where each of the beeps of, the EKGs, you know how it makes a bunch of mountains and valleys? Each of those has a number or a name or a letter. And there's a syndrome where the L, QRST, there's a long QT syndrome where the space and time between the Q and the T is too long. It should be just QRST, right? But it's QRST, and that'll kill you. And one of the first symptoms is you wake up dead. I mean, they just don't. So now we've had, well, one of the first symptoms is syncope. You faint before you die. Your heart stops. And now you see defibrillators everywhere, and that's what will save you, is a defibrillator. Smart machines, they'll tell you what's going on, and they'll start your heart again. And it's in my family. We all did genetic tests for it and everything like that. I don't have it, so my kids have as much likelihood of getting it as anybody else. 5 out of the 8 Cowley, I am one of 8, have that genetic defect, and they're either on beta blockers or have pacemakers put in, and they're still alive except my one brother, David's son, Levi, who swam across the pool, woke up, and died. And he had long QT syndrome, and he was in Korea. He was at the top of his army battalion for strength and wellness and everything, but that wasn't the point. It was that it was a genetic defect. So it's good to know what you can know about your family history. Genealogy is good for that. There's my dad and his little sister, Margaret, on some stream in Pittsburgh area. There he is getting into trouble. No, my father became a newspaper man, and this is just a fun shot. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 3, 4, 5, 6. That's not a real number for being arrested. He's looking very serious. So he worked for the New York Times, along with Ed Sullivan, he said. Ed Sullivan was on staff with me. And then when Ed Sullivan became really big, a really big show, my dad continuously would say, I said that to Ed back in 38. Sure, Dad. There he is in the Army. And there he is returning from the Army. That's my father. That is John Alden, I believe. Bob. Okay, Bob. That's Ursa's older brother. He's now passed away. That is EBG, Bruce Glenn, we call him. That's Bruce Glenn, I'm pretty sure. This is part of a huge picture that your dad had something to do with publishing the Academy towards New Church University. I don't know. Pretty sure this guy's a Pitcairn, but I'm not sure who. I'm not sure about that either. I'm not sure. But I can find that photograph in a number of historical books of the Academy. It was in what's called the Civic and Social Club. And the whole, that stage is, this is not even a third, this is probably a tenth of, if the whole thing were the same scale, it would fill the rest of the screen with servicemen that came back after the war and came to the Civic and Social Center for a celebration. I looked for the full picture, but I couldn't find it. Anyway, my dad went in and out of the Army and survived, as many people did and many didn't. There he is, and you recognize some of the other people in that picture? There's Harold Cranch. Dad and Harold were really good friends. They had the CCC, the Cranch, the Crunlin, and the Cowley. Of course, I think that might be the Crunlin. I don't recognize his face. That's my father. And that is Bill Kittner. Bill Kittner. He served, continued to serve in the military or in intelligence for a number of years. And they're at some party probably in the 50s. I'm pretty sure it's Kittner. I can look it up. And if you wonder why I do that thing, there's my dad doing that thing. I do it really, and he didn't. He loved shaving. So, my father and mother out on a lake doing what we love doing around here. My mother's partly Canadian because her mother's born in Canada. There's my dad hitting a kid with a paddle. I think he's trying to help my brother Tony out of the water. My dad loved fishing, and he loved horseback riding. Check out the car, right? Yeah, I know there's some part, even if you don't look at the people, because there's like Oh, it's Michael's just telling his family story. There's some other good things in the background. That is the chicken farm I worked at when I was a child labor. I spent 2 summers picking eggs and shoveling chicken stuff. Yeah, it's hell. It's hell, especially when it gets really hot and you're in the chicken coops and you just are shoveling chicken manure because there's a lot of poo. One of my sisters was dating David Sherwood, the Sherwood farm, chicken farm. So we would go there and they said, hey, you want to ride the horse? And Dad said, yeah, hopped right on it. There he is teasing my mother, putting squirrels down her back. No, they're actually holding a squirrel that we found and kind of domesticated. And I think he was just squeezing her neck. He didn't put another squirrel down her back. But there they are. He's got about 5 more years to live. He doesn't know that. Nobody knew it. Here's my family. This is the famous Cowley picture that took place in New York City. I'm the cutest one in there. So that's my sister Terry, my next older brother Malcolm, then my brother Kevin, Denise, who married Robert Grubb, Jenny, who married Jeb Blair, David, who married Bonnie Alden, me, and Tony, who married Natalie Rose. If you know any of those people. I didn't mention the other ones because they married far, far away and out of the church. So you wouldn't know Carrie Catarano, you wouldn't know Malcolm's Terry, or my brother Kevin's family. Kevin and Malcolm and David and Tony all joined the military, and I joined the Army of the Lord. There we are in a boat at Fallsdale in 1965 with our pet raccoon. And you know, toys back then weren't made in China. They were made in Japan. But they were still made, and kids still played with them. That's my little brother Tony and me, my sister Denise, and Jenny. Here we are at Coney Island. We lived in Bushwick area of Brooklyn. There's a new Netflix movie called Bushwick. It's horrible. But that's what it was like. We had these brand new buildings called the Projects, and we got an 11th story apartment in the Projects, and I grew up in the Projects, except when we went to the farm, which was where the previous picture was taken. That's at the farm. But otherwise, we might go to Coney Island or Rockaway Beach, which are 2 famous beaches in the New York area. Not too far. They're sort of just south of Brooklyn, where we grew up. And that's me and all my siblings again. Any questions? My father lived long enough to marry off his oldest daughter, Terry, and to see her and the only grandchild he ever saw. He now has 27. And that is, again, at the farm in Fallsdale, Pennsylvania, not Belsano. That's the Cowley side in Pennsylvania, but the Odner side moved north of Lake Wallenpaupack. When Lake Wallenpaupack was made, it was from flooding the Paupack River, and it was beautiful and lovely and clear, and all the motorboats came and everything, and Flora said, I want something quiet, peaceful. Flora's the one, the Welkley, and it looks like the actress. So they moved and they bought this farm because Richard Nixon's uncle was into potatoes, and my grandfather, Loyal, was into agricultural. He worked for the Southland Corporation. So he and Richard Nixon's uncle had communications at their conventions that they would go to. And Richard Nixon said, the money, his uncle, I forget his name, his money's in potatoes, buy some property. So my grandfather bought this 75-acre farm just north of Lake Wallenpaupack, Honesdale, Damascus area, northeast Pennsylvania, right on the Delaware River, near the Delaware River. And maybe they grew 3 potatoes, but really, Grandpa Odner got it so Flora could have a place where the motorboats weren't disturbing the birds. And really, it's because this beautiful falls were on that property. Not really, but these beautiful falls are on that property. That's why they called it Fallsdale. And I grew up swimming down those falls. I'd start way up here and slide all the way down on my skinny butt. And that's what we did for the summers because we got out of the projects as soon as school was over. We loaded up the car. We drove to the farm. We stayed there all summer. We kicked our shoes off and didn't know where they were all summer because we didn't need them. And then, come September, we went back to 130 Moore Street, apartment 11A in Brooklyn, and did our summer, our winters there until those cute little girls holding raccoons turned into beautiful young ladies, And life in 1968 was not really safe in New York City, especially for white kids, probably any kids, but it was a civil rights movement. I was the only white child in my class. There was many Puerto Ricans, many African Americans, which is not bad. It's just talk about being a minority, right? We just felt it wasn't safe. There was a couple threatening things that happened with the daughters, and so we decided we're going to stay on the farm. And so we did, and we sort of moved around from one place that had heat in it when we needed to go to some place in the winter that was warm, and then back to the farmhouse, which was coal stoves and potbelly. And eventually in 1972, the year that my dad died, we had bought a house in Damascus that, not the year he died, we were there for a couple of years, but the homeland of our heart is Fallsdale, not New York City. I can claim to be a New Yorker if I want to be a New Yorker, but I really don't want to be a New Yorker. But I've been there. I can talk just like a New Yorker. Genealogy. This is Carl Theophilus Oden. This is my mother's side of the family. The other was my whatever. Carl Theophilus Oden. You've heard his name, perhaps. He wrote a lot of things for the church. He married. She was Zandre. She was Greek ancestry. She was an orphan. Bernathan Academy ran an orphanage, and she was one of the people that came because her mother went off into show business and never came back. So Zandre Lulu, married Carl Theophilus Odener, and they had a lot of kids. The guy looking like Adolf Hitler is my grandfather. That was the style then. This is Hugo Odener's sister, Cyril, who was adopted by Carl Theophilus Odener, as was Hugo Odener, who may be in the picture. And again, not that telling you all their names is going to make any difference. It's just that's my grandfather's family when he was, maybe 25, something like that. There were 12 Odeners in that family. The youngest two were Philip Odener and Ormond Odener. And Ormond taught me in high school, and Philip Odener was the bishop of the Lord's New Church, one of my favorite theologians of my studies. And I come by it honestly. He's my grandfather's second youngest brother, Philip. There's my grandfather again with Carl Theophilus Odener and a couple of children, as well as Grandma, Lulu Zandre. And there's Grandma and Grandpa Flora Welkley and Loyal Odener. So I wanted to refer back to, this is Flora, as you can see. That's my grandma. That is Loyal and Flora at their 50th wedding anniversary with their 10 kids. 6 brothers and 4 sisters. My mother's down here at the bottom, and this is the only one left alive, Bia. That's Hopi Schumann. That's Melly Rushman. That's Carl Fritz Odener. Flora, Loyal. That's Philip Odener. That's Hugh Odener. That's Dan Odener. No, that's David Odener, Dan Odener, and Jerry Odener. So that's my mother's side of the family.
So which one is
Odio is his youngest brother, and he's not in any of these pictures. He might have been in that picture. This might be Philip, and that might be Ormond. He died within a few years of this picture, and then my grandfather took care of the younger children. Carmen, Vincent, Fred. No, Fred's not. Different. Yeah, don't let me get my odors mixed up. That is Heilman. That's the Otho Heilman of the Otho Heilman band. All right, let me skip through this because, okay, photography. Would you like to learn to see in a completely new way? Photography is a great thing to do. Whew, out of all those pictures, don't worry, I got more. But just some of the things you can do. And now you have no excuse not to take pictures, right? Everybody's got a smartphone. These things are amazing, as I'll show you in a few pictures from now. There's my father gardening, because that's the thing that comes up next. So my dad loved gardening. That's the barn at the falls in Fallsdale. Those were trees that they planted when I was young that are now huge, and that's what happens with trees, right? But I remember when they planted those seedlings.
Is your Fallsview farm still in the family?
Yes, it is. Aunt Bea lives up there, the one that's remaining, and Jenny, my sister, is up there seeing her now. She just turned 80, And who knows how much longer we have with that generation. Irises. So gardening, again, just a beautiful thing to get involved with, whether it's just for flowers or growing your own vegetables. You can eat healthy. Communing in nature enhances the spiritual side of my being, one person wrote. And many, many people, gardening is their number one pastime. It's the number one pastime in North America for people, is gardening. Now, people probably spend a lot more money on some other pastimes, because gardening can be pretty easy to do. But it's so satisfying to have your hands in the dirt. It's spiritually good for you. Swedenborg himself was an avid gardener, and it's just a good thing to do. Birding. Yeah, a lot of it says about birding. I'm not going to go. Language. I didn't even write down the paragraph there. Writing. Write. Okay, journal. Singing and playing musical instruments. That's, again, you can all become involved with doing something like that if you like music. Right, Bob? Tell him, buy a piano. Painting and drawing, again, musical and artistic outlets for keeping our mind active as we're aging. What do I do? What do I do? I'm so lonely, I have nothing to do. Get involved with some other people that are singing or doing something together. Volunteering is the first one, and somehow I messed up on my slideshow, and volunteering is the first one that people do to fill their time if they don't want to go back to work. But you can work in your field volunteering, which is wonderful if you have skills that you can share even if you're not getting paid for it. So bicycling is the next one. Walking or hiking is too hard on your knees, try bicycling. Several respondents say that bicycling rekindles the feelings of freedom. And you may not be able to physically bicycle anymore either. And if you can't, then motorcycling. I made that one up. So there I am, right here in our own front yard, May of 2018, deciding to buy my brother-in-law's BMW 1000 motorcycle. I've already had a 750. I want to do more. What do I want to do? I don't know, take a long trip, eh? So that was a trip I took last summer. I left Toronto. I landed in, I stopped. I left late because I wanted to go. So the heart is, the Joe Knight property. That is the Joe Knight property. So I just put a heart there for it because I really wanted to go see the Joe Knight property. So did I? You bet I did. How did I get there? On my motorcycle. Was I following the rainbow? Can you see the rainbow in that picture? Way up there. Yeah, so that's me on a motorcycle. It's not actually on this trip. I was up north going somewhere else. But I decided I'm going to build a trailer. I'd been studying trailers. They're all over the place. If you ever travel, look, you might see a motorcycle pulling a trailer. I didn't know whether I wanted the tent part to go out over the tongue or the tent part to go out over the back. I wanted to be able to build a platform that I could pull on my motorcycle when I stopped, just pull off the thing on top, which you can see the car carrier. So I didn't build 4, I built 1, and it looks like, well, you'll see. It doesn't look like that. Go back to this. So I decided to build a trailer to pull behind my motorcycle to take my trip. I studied. This is somebody on the internet, Paul Norton, took his BMW and built a hitch. See the hitch at the bottom below the plate? So I said, okay. Yeah, there he is. Yeah, Paul Norton. I know. I can't explain it. It's a mystery. So you might recognize the place where that is. That's the manse basement, turned into a trailer building garage. And so, pardon? I took off the wheels and just carried it out before I put the tongue on it. So I'm building a trailer. I actually shortened it. It was originally this wide, and I shortened it to this wide. And with the fenders over it, I thought, I want to keep those 12-inch tires and not go down to 8, which would mean I could do it flat across, just not have the fenders sticking up. But I said, nah, I'm gonna work with that. So I did measure and measure, and I built and built, and that's what it looked like before I painted it. So the framing of wood is over top of the framing, and if you follow things like that and like it, I'll show you the pictures. But otherwise, this could be totally boring for you. Like, who cares? And the car top carrier was built to go on top of it. And then there's this right here, where my finger is to right there, you see the hinges? This flips out over top of the tongue. And I don't have a picture showing that, except for that one way back when. So it actually was built to do this. It flips out, that's where the hinge is, that little dark spot there. So, and then that's supported with some legs. And so I had it all built so I could easily stop driving, pull the pod off the top, flip open the thing, and plop my tent off on it, and I'd have a nice flat spot to sleep. I finished up some things out in the driveway there, and I welded together a hitch. I bought a flux core welder, which is so much easier than arc welding. So if you're into welding or anything like that, I'll lend you my welder. The picnic table out in the field there will never fall apart because I re-welded it. And did I do a good job? So that's what it looks like when I'm pulling it along. I have a bicycle on top. Inside the pod is a bicycle trailer that I put onto the bicycle when I get to the place I want to go camping, put the bike and the trailer together, and I go off into the woods pulling my camping equipment in a bicycle trailer. So it's a trailer that pulls a bike that pulls a trailer. It's very redundant. If I get broken down, all I got to do is ride away on my bike. I don't have a picture showing you the setup. But that is in front of, where was that, the name of that road, Arrow Road, Dad? You told me you knew it, up north of Perry Sound, the Arrow, named after the airplanes?
Oh, Avro Arrow.
Avro Arrow, that's right outside of Avro Arron Road. There you go. So that's my first stop. If you go back to the map, that's what the first blue dot was. I just pulled over. I'd slept there that night. I'm going the wrong direction. That's the other side. Did I ever actually pull that stinking pod that weighed a ton at this point and the bicycle off the top of my trailer to sleep on top of my trailer? No, I never did. It was so much easier when I was exhausted. Just plop my tent, just pull a string, the tent opens up. It's a great system. So I slept beside my motorcycle for all the times I took my trip. I'm redoing my trailer now to lighten it up of those two pieces of plywood that hold my fat body on top of the trailer. And it was a great design, great in theory. Nope, you learn by your mistakes. So there you go. There's my mistake. I even have a couple pieces of bed frame sticking out to slide the thing off the trailer so they don't take out the reflectors in the back there. But I just thought, that's crazy. Why? Just put the tent on the ground. Why do all that? Why did I think that was such a great idea? Well, if it was really pouring or something, I'd have a dry surface. If it was really rocky, I don't really care. By the time you ride 500 miles, you're going to sleep no matter what the ground's like. And that's how I sleep. It's great. I have a great mattress system, a great camping cot thing that Gwenda and Grace gave me for Christmas. So you set those two things up in 5 minutes. It's really comfortable on the ground. It's not really cold, so I'm not doing winter camping in that. But that's my setup pretty much every time I stopped. There I am on my way to the Joe Knight property, stopping in Chapleau and Folliet. Sorry, I don't, the names don't roll out of my mouth like I've been saying them since I was a kid. So I decided to go to Chapleau because a guy out in Grand Prairie, church member out there, oh my goodness, sorry it's so late, guys. Talked to me about going to Chapleau. He grew up in Folliet or Chapleau, and so I said, I'll go visit it. So it's the train station there, and the train went by. The train might be going by right now as we speak. And there I am looking very, very motorcyclish, and I decided to go and visit that spot. And you probably know what that is. And there's a very emotional pastor stopping at the Terry Fox Memorial where he had to stop his run with Lake Superior in the distance behind him. There's another place I stopped just overlooking the far northern tip of northern shore of Lake Superior. I'm on my way back now from this trip. And it's very close to where Paddle to the Sea got put into the water. That's right. There I am at the Joe Knight property. I had to detach my trailer from the motorcycle. I thought, oh, I'll be able just to kind of pull it in along this cleared area. No, I couldn't. So I couldn't even pull it out. I had to detach it, turn the motorcycle and trailer around, and then attach them again. I parked there. I walked the 2.5 miles in to see the Joe Knight property. It looks like that. The church owns 50 acres up there on this lake, and that's the most beautiful prominent spot where the rock sticks out. I might have shown you the big white piece of quartz I brought from there. I can show it to you. I didn't bring it down. That I pilfered off of there. People obviously camp out there when they're canoeing up along that lake. From the lake, I sort of walked along in the water to take a picture of that same spot from the water. So that's the Joe Knight property. I just wanted to see it. It's got beautiful trees. It hasn't been touched in probably forever. It's never been logged, as far as we know. It is really thick, and so are the bugs. I got one picture, just my chest. I'm wearing a bug hat. No, I wasn't. I was just wearing a lot of bug repellent. Just covered. I mean, literally. I could have gone like this and had 100 mosquitoes on my hand. It was a lot of fun. So I came home. Look at that. Happily back in my driveway. You'd think that'd be the end of the slides. And you're right. So I wanted to talk about not being afraid to do new things when you're old, when you're olding, when you're aging, when you're looking at your life and going, my goodness, I've done it all. No, you haven't. Which one of you guys went on your motorcycle across the North Shore of Lake Superior? Dave? Nope. So, I mean, there's all, wonderful things. Bob, thank you for sticking it out. So I just wanted to share with you some ideas about what I do for my mental health and for my recreation, what I do to keep my mind active and thinking about continuing to stay in shape, running, hiking, biking. When I go on that long trip, I end up hiking with a bunch of other people, and I run meetings there that have to do with 12-step and recovery. So I'm volunteering my time to help people stay healthy. And it's just a heck of a lot of fun to do something like riding a motorcycle. It's very dangerous, yes, I know. And I take every precaution. Very involved with some online. People say, did you see this thing on Facebook? I'm not on Facebook, I tell people, but I actually am on Facebook, I'll confess. I'm on Facebook as an anonymous person so that I can be partaking of various websites and discussion groups that are social and recreationally related to me. Professionally, I'm not on Facebook, and as Michael Cowley, I'm not on Facebook, because if you want to reach me professionally, you got my email. It's a social media, and there's something in me that doesn't really, it's a social media, not a professional media. Yeah, sure, Michael, make up your own world. Yeah, I have. So I was talking to somebody saying, I'm not on Facebook. And Gwen says, why do you tell people that? You are too on Facebook. Yeah, I am. I'm not telling you what my name is on Facebook. It's actually the name of a character from a poem that I love. And I tell people, the first thing when they read my profile, it says, this is all fake. This is not my birthday. This is not my name. This is the way I'm on Facebook. For my privacy's sake, I only have friends that I've contacted. I don't accept friend requests from anybody else. But so on Facebook, I find people who have built their own hitches for their motorcycles and built their own trailers and know what it's like to have my model 1984 motorcycle and give me clues and tips and stuff like that. So I use it for social life. Spiritual life is a different thing. There's some spiritual stuff on there too, but basically if you want to reach me on my business account, not my social account. If you want to socialize with me, you want to be my friend, be my friend. And here you are, being my friend. So anyway, that's my little rant, a little bit of a rant about, I find myself being so obsessive and compulsive about being on Facebook that when I was on as Michael Cowley, I was on all the time, or way too much time, because it was always something else, some friends, some this, some that. So I actually removed myself on Facebook. Clap, please. That way I'll know that it's time to quit.